Hello, Pastor Chris Wickland here with your weekly political rant. At this hour, we must be under no illusion that in this nation things are getting worse and worse for Christians, with the likes of Hat and Tash being frog-marched away from Speaker's Corner by a two-tier policing system that puts Muslims before Christians. This lady has been stabbed, had a terrorist plot against her, yet the police sadly have consistently chosen to side with the Muslim mobs that are persecuting her. With the likes of Adam Smith Connor, who was arrested for praying in his head outside of an abortion clinic and fined £1,000 in a court case that is still, as of yet, unresolved. A new Labour government are now committed to enforcing buffer zones around abortion clinics in England and Wales. So Section 9 of the Public Order Act will be enforced from the 31st of October 2024. So now it's illegal to pray in your head in certain dictated parts of Britain by your government. You see, it's really important that as Christians we need to be aware of all these things that are going on around us right now politically, because things are turning against us right now, and we do need to watch out for ourselves. However, let's not also forget, on an encouraging note, that there is actually a separation of church and state here in the UK. So according to ancient English law, for example, in the Magna Carta, you may or may not know this, but the state is not allowed to tell the English church how, where, and when they can worship. So for our current Labour government, or any Labour government, or any government for that matter, to tell us that we're not allowed to pray in our heads is an extreme overreach that does need to be challenged. No government on earth has the right to take away your sovereignty as a human being. You see, no government on earth has the right to tell you what to think, how to think, and when to think, and most definitely, no government has the right or authority to tell you where you can pray, when you can pray, or not pray. You see, prayer is the inalienable human right of every individual on earth. You know, you can pray to whomever, whatever, however, whenever, and the government has no authority to tell you otherwise. And when governments think that they can, I'm afraid, sadly, this means that as a nation we've turned a dark corner and we're moving away from democracy to potential totalitarianism. These are not good signs of the times, right? Now, the law states that we are all equal, unless, of course, you're a Christian, and specifically a heterosexual white one. Let me give you an example of some of the crazy things that are going on at the moment. You know, if you are not trans, then you are not equal, and women's rights are to be trampled in favour of trans rights. Chris, that's a bit of an overreach. Where are you getting that from? Well, let's have a look. So in our Olympics in Paris, we saw men pretending to be women, grotesquely beating women to a pulp, all in the name of inclusivity, fairness, and trans rights. You know what? Let's call it for what it was. It was a legislated abuse of women on live TV, and the nation should be ashamed of themselves for not challenging this gross wickedness and injustice. But hey, everyone's too scared to say anything, because you cannot challenge these things, because if you do, you're some kind of phobic. You know, what's the ones at the moment? Whether it's, transphobic, homophobic, Islamophobic. In other words, put up, shut up, or else we, the illiberal liberals, will take you to court, smear your name, and counsel you, you white Christian bigot. Welcome to Great Britain, where their two-tier political system, two-tier policing, two-tier media, two-tier justice. Christians, I'm saying all these things. I'm being quite bold with what I'm saying, because we need to be aware of what's going on in our culture and our society right now. Now listen, if you're like me and you're one of those UK patriotic Christians, well then it's feeding time at the zoo. People like me are called extremist, white, right-winged, Nazi pro-Zionistic thugs. And people like me need to be dealt with harshly. Now, we do live in an aggressive, liberal, left secular culture that, let's be honest, is quite often openly against Christianity. And we could see a clear example of this again in the Olympics in Paris. It was basically a staging ground to disparage, mock, smear, and hate Jesus and Christians. But if you mock illegal immigration or against the mass importation of Islam or speak against trans, then you're a bigot, a racist, and the worst kind of scum, and you could be potentially be locked up for having incorrect thinking. Again, welcome to Great Britain. Again, this might sound extreme, but this really isn't. There's some crazy things that are going on. I'm not putting it on here, but there's a lot going on in your nation right now that we need to be aware of. Now, this all looks terrible, right? But I personally believe God's at work here. You see, this could all be a turning point for something else in our nation right now. Why? Because you see, behind all the bad news and the headlines, I'm seeing some strange things in our society in the UK, which I've never seen before. I'm starting to see a new phenomena of cultural Christians coming out of the woodwork. These are people who love traditional conservative values, but don't necessarily believe in God. But these are people who recognize that without Christianity at the foundation of this nation, then we are done as a nation. Even the likes of Richard Dawkins, who I'm sure we all know is one of the most outspoken atheists of our time, he admits himself that he is a cultural Christian. I remember when I first watched this interview, I was taken aback. Because although he doesn't believe in God, he does love the hymns, culture and society which has come about through the history of Christianity in this nation. Many of the so-called new atheists are also waking up to a stark, cold reality. If you take Christianity out of the equation in Britain, you'll end up with people who will basically believe in anything, i.e., a man can just magically become a woman, for example, and everyone else just has to go along with it, or else. Also, atheism creates a power and cultural vacuum. And if you undermine faith and people of faith, then you'll fill that void often with another faith in its place. Now, you may not know this, but if you do a quick Google search, you can see that approximately 50% of the world is religious in some way, and the other 50% are not. So to try and do away with religion and faith in a nation where faith and religion has been the key foundation and backbone of it for nearly 2,000 years, I think is a very dangerous, precarious and silly thing to do. We now have the rise of a different faith in this nation, which is adding more trouble to the mix. Now, please, I have to say this, that I am old school liberal in my views when it comes to other faiths in this nation, in that all people have the right to go about their lives and live out their faith in peace. However, this nation of Britain, we need to remember, is and has always been primarily a Christian nation for the last 2,000 years. Our Houses of Parliament, for example, literally has scripture carved into its very walls. Our rule of law has come from Judeo-Christian influences. This nation, you know what, for all its foibles and follies, is still a Christian country at its heart. However, rampant hard left secularism and uncontrolled immigration has now caused a societal flux that is breaking down our national identity, our culture, and our values. And it's starting to spill out onto the streets, and we're seeing all kinds of trouble brewing in our nation because of this. However, like I said, thinking that God might be at work here, I'm seeing people starting to wake up and realize that if Christianity is not endorsed or supported, then our British way of life is done. You see, if you want to be a cultural Christian, you have to acknowledge that without an active Christian faith and community in Britain, you cannot have your atheistic cultural Christianity. Now, at this point in time, I see a very interesting intersection going on. I can see that cultural Christians and actual Christians should potentially come together and fight together for our nation, probably in a way that we have never seen done before. We Christians need to support those who stand up for Britain and its values and ways. But also the cultural Christians, they need to stand up alongside of us. For in a strange twist of fate, I believe we now need each other because of the state of our nation and where things are going. You see, if we as Christians want to continue enjoying our diminishing freedoms, and they are diminishing almost weekly, then brothers and sisters, we need to stand up and be counted at this hour. Now, some of you will not want to stand up, but could I just implore you to at least consider the future that you're leaving for your children and your grandchildren? And I'd also like to say to Christians that, we need to defend, we really do need to defend what's left of our Christian heritage in this nation. You see, people have paid dearly to give us that heritage, and to do nothing at this hour, I believe, is a betrayal to those who helped give this nation what we enjoy today. Can I appeal to all Christians and cultural Christians at this hour? We need each other. We are wanting to defend the same freedoms and rights as each other. We need the cultural Christian atheists to support Christian communities to flourish by law and legislation in this nation. But Christians need to join our cultural Christians in their marches for Britain and stand with them. For if we do not stand together now, this nation will lose its identity, its soul, and its heart forever.